Bats, it's Disaster here, and I wanted to say thank you for coming back to my channel. Today's video is going to be why I left World of Warcraft in Shadowlands. Now, I'm a new player to Final Fantasy XIV. I've gone through a lot of the story, but that's not what the video is about today. But before I continue, I'd like to remind you about the fact that I am a self-published author, and my book is here. It's a dystopic urban fantasy, so if you're into that sort of thing, please check it out. I'll include the link in the description below. Now, to the point of the video, of course, I want to keep it so that Final Fantasy players can understand what I'm saying, so I will try to reduce the jargon and make it understandable for everyone watching this, just in case they're curious about why players are leaving World of Warcraft from a role-player's perspective. That said, the focus of today's video will mostly be story and such like that, but it might also include a little bit of gameplay. But being a role-player, my primary focus is on the story in the game. So, World of Warcraft Shadowlands. Now, initially, going to the afterlife did sound pretty interesting. We had been exposed to the Shadowlands, or World of Warcraft's version of the afterlife, through things like a certain class, a Death Knight, and their specific class questline. And class questlines are like job questlines in Final Fantasy. Now, we learned that it was a pretty dark place. I'm assuming that the Maw, or Hell, in World of Warcraft, was what we mostly were exposed to. There was a questline, Una, about, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but about a little Draenei child, and they're like space goats, who turned into a ghost, and she was in the Shadowlands, at least that's what I believe, throughout that entire secret questline, and I thought that the Shadowlands would be a bit more like that, a lot darker themed than what it ended up to be. In fact, I thought those would be the primary elements in what we'd be facing. Now, we do fight in the Maw, or Hell, in World of Warcraft quite a bit. Our characters are fighting bad guys pertaining to that, and it's supposedly a main plot point, but it's not a very interesting one. The other zones, however, are different varieties of the afterlife. So you have your typical angel, Greek-like, holy sort of thing. That's what it feels like. People will correct me and say, no, it's not holy magic or light magic, but that's what it feels like. The entire zone is blinding. Then you have your undead warriors, Maldraxxus, which are very interesting, actually. It's the army that protects the Shadowlands, which you might not expect would need to be protected, but here we are. We've got Revendreth, my least favorite area. Very surprising, I'm sure, to some people who know World of Warcraft and know what I like, but I will get into that later, trust me. And then we've got the Night Fae. So the Night Fae are like the fairies, kind of like fairies in Final Fantasy XIV, a little bit different when it comes to lore, and I really did enjoy Night Fae until one particular point I will mention later. So that is basically what the feel of Shadowlands is, kind of unexpected, odd. They're adding new zones apparently in 9.1, or a new zone, that I'm not into, I'm not checking it out, but... So the way the afterlife is presented is rather miserable. No matter what you're doing, you're going to die and you're going to have to serve again. There is no sort of paradise at all, actually, at least what we're presented. And for some characters, that's fine, I suppose. Shadowlands, according to World of Warcraft lore, is ever expansive, but the themes did not ring right with me, at least. I didn't like them. I tried to give them a chance at first, but I'm just like, this is not fun. I don't like these stories. None of the zone stories. Whereas I did not like the previous expansion, Battle for Azeroth, for its overarching story. I did like the zones. That is not the case with Shadowlands. Now, I will say my opinions aren't all negative. Maldraxxus, which is the Undying Army, and expands a bit more about undead lore in World of Warcraft, is something that I did favor. I really did like Maldraxxus and everything behind it. In fact, if only that could have been the thing that kept me in the game, because Maldraxxus, as much as people will say it's an ugly zone, is really neat. I like the idea of fighting valiantly. And yeah, I did say, oh, well, it sounds miserable to constantly be fighting in the afterlife. But if your character makes that choice, that's fine. The thing is, every zone you're fighting in some shape or form, some battle, and there's nothing presented for those actually true of heart. And no, that would not include the Kyrians, which is the light zone, where they erase your memory completely and turn you into a system, a cog, if you will, in the machine, and not very interesting to me at all. Not my thing. And I do want to shout out the Night Fae. I adored the Night Fae quite a bit. I loved it, loved the concept, loved nature, really big biology fan. I mean, I got a degree in biology, so I would love that sort of thing. And they had to ruin it. So in World of Warcraft, there's something called the Alliance, and I'm a horde player. I absolutely despise the faction war, which I will get into later, I'm sure. But they drill into your head, if you're a horde player like me, that you were perfectly fine with the events that led up to how bad Shadowlands ended up, which was basically a tree, the home of a bunch of characters known as the Night Elves, were butchered and slain in the burning of Teldrassil. It was a terrible event. A bunch of innocent civilians died because of the Horde War Chief. I never supported Sylvanas, who was the Horde War Chief at the time. Absolutely hated that event. My characters just would not support this at all. It goes against everything they believe in. They would have saved refugees, and yet you're pushed into a narrative in Night Fae, and they drill it into you hard. They drill into you Tyrande hard. I do not like Tyrande, who is the leader of Night Elves, at all. And she's ever present in the Night Fae, so that ruined it wholeheartedly for me. I just wanted to focus on the nature elements and everything beautiful, and it had to revolve around Tyrande. It wasn't even about rescuing Night Elf refugees and people who had died and putting their souls to rest. It was around Tyrande. And as someone who hates her and is uninterested, hard pass. There were some good stories in the Night Fae area. Very good stories. But what did it all lead back to? Tyrande. I could rant about the entire Night Fae zone in its own video, practically. I'd go step by step, but that's not necessary right now. So that's a good way to segue into what went wrong in Battle for Azeroth. I stopped liking the game significantly in Battle for Azeroth. Now, as I said, and you could probably tell by the tone of my voice, the burning of Teldrassil is not something I agreed with, and not something I felt was handled well at all. To me, none of this made sense, and yes, I read the short novel or whatever thing happened, not Before the Storm, but the short story about Sylvanas' decisions. None of it made any sense. The factions should have been reuniting together after the Burning Legion, which was a bunch of demons that tried to take over the planet, essentially. I feel like both of the entire world of Azeroth should have been reunited and fighting against a new threat, which was the Void, which is very clearly trying to destroy Azeroth again. But the factions had to erupt into war again, and it just was entirely unnecessary in my... So I'm sure everyone's waiting for me to talk about the famous Sylvanas, and about how much I hate her. So I don't like her, actually. I'm actually rather indifferent to her, and I don't like her decision. I don't think she's been handled well as a character at all. I liked her prior to this whole fiasco, prior to Battle for Azeroth, really. I was also misled, though, about her lore, and I thought that she wasn't butchering innocent civilians and thought she was just killing and raising characters in wartime, when I learned that she went out of her way to kill civilians and raise them, which is very hypocritical, considering she should be all for free will and the undeath, but, I don't like her. And just so, though, I don't like any World of Warcraft character at this point. None of them appeal to me anymore, and there's all this... Everything that I loved about the game seems to be dead for me, anyway, and it's just very disappointing. But that aside, specifically Teldrassil and the handling of it, I would have done it differently. I would have had the Alliance, which is the enemy faction to the Horde, one of their characters, possibly Gen Greymane, who's Worgen, a werewolf, be possessed by the Void and possibly burn the tree, blame it on Sylvanas, and the Void has a tendency to completely mess up and mess around with people and try to cause complete havoc and destruction, so sort of like the Ascians in Final Fantasy XIV. Actually, it's a pretty good connection. But I would have had that happen, or Gen Greymane, who does hate Sylvanas, get so angry that he burns the tree and blames it on Sylvanas, or something or other where the Alliance is actually at fault and blames the Horde. Because for once, it would be nice to have the Alliance be the bad guy, whereas every single time it's the Horde framed as completely evil, and before someone says, oh, well, that's what the Horde was meant to be. I don't agree with that sentiment, and I thought that the Horde was a bunch of outcasts who were a bit different working together. I thought we were beyond the whole, oh, we're only monsters murdering the innocents, but it looks like Blizzard really wants to paint us that way. Now, I do want to say that despite my transgressions, I did just leave the game. I didn't bother the devs or anything, and I will express my dislike of the story, but people should never attack the devs or say anything mean or to them specifically. Just say that you don't like the writing, point out what you don't like I am here, and explain what you would have done differently, and that's the best solution. And talk with your, if you're not enjoying the game, take a break. I'm taking a break, and that's okay. I'm going to Final Fantasy, so. That said, it seems like the WoW devs in general do not take constructive criticism, which is a bit disappointing. I was very disappointed to hear about several responses, but I'm going to use this to segue into, aside from the story, which they're not very receptive to listening to the player feedback on, no customization. So, we have very bad customization to begin with in World of Warcraft. It's nothing like other games. And I was really excited when customization was presented as possibly a main theme to Shadowlands. I was like, oh my goodness, finally we're getting some recognition as people who want to customize our characters. And people will scream at me, oh, Barbie dress up, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you go sit down? Because some of us like different things in the game, and not all of us are hardcore players. So I was excited to be able to customize my character a bit more. Until I found out that the main characters that I play, Blood Elves, got jewelry, and that's basically it. Now, the diversity skins are extremely important and should have been added far before, which is, it's about time, yes. But everything else we got was terrible. Night Elves got the most, and I'm very jealous of their half-shaved haircut. It looks exactly like one of my characters, actually, which I'm very annoyed with, by the way, that Blood Elves did not get that hairstyle. The punkish hairstyle. And I was hoping to get so much more, but instead, we got just jewelry and barely any options for Blood Elves. We didn't even get Red Eyes to be able to play Dark Rangers, no Fangs to play Sand Lane, no lore for Sand Lane, and that's something I was really hoping for, either Allied Race or through customization. And I just ended up super disappointed with everything the main race I've got, which was jewelry. Basically just jewelry, and maybe some ear options, and oh, blue eyes. I mean, I guess that satisfies the high elf community, but someone like me, who was interested in the nuance in Blood Elves, and how they had been a bit darker than your regular, boring, typical fantasy elves, that all seems to be completely crushed and destroyed, and now people are trying to Lightforge Blood Elves, which is ridiculous, but I'm not going to get into that. Again, these are all my personal opinions. It's okay if you want that, perfectly fine. I disagree. But I won't get into that argument now. I could make a whole video on that sort of thing, actually. But anyway, I digress. So, back to the story, I feel a complete disconnect with my characters in Shadowlands. Anyway, back to the story. I play Death Knights in World of Warcraft, and they are essentially undead beings that have nuance. They're anti-heroes, and they're supposed to fight for Azeroth, my characters anyway. Now people will tell you that, oh, undead have no emotion, blah, 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 blah. They're wrong, actually. I could go into a whole rant about that, but basically, the undead do have stronger instances of rage and sadness, but they can have their personalities and emotions. It all depends on the individual and person, and that all comes down to free will. That's relevant because my Death Knights would not care about Shadowlands at all, actually. There's the Scourge, a bunch of undead zombies and skeletons that want to rip apart the living, running throughout Northrend, which is the frozen area of World of Warcraft, and they're on a rampage. No one's controlling them. The person who did previously, the Lich King, is no longer the Lich King because the crown controlling them is destroyed. So we've got a bunch of undead just rushing across the entirety of Northrend, possibly spreading throughout Azeroth, and my character, who's a Death Knight, who would actually care about that sort of thing and not Shadowlands, is confined to Shadowlands as their main battle. And before someone's like, oh, well, I mean, you can totally make up your own story, I could. But as a role player, I like to have some connection to the ongoing story, and there is none. It's just all Shadowlands, nothing, we're not returning to Azeroth, the place I actually care about, and Shadowlands is not a realm that I necessarily care about at all, so. I no longer feel connected to my characters, the outer world, or anything due to this. I mean, my characters would be sitting there for 2 years doing nothing, while everyone else is playing around in Shadowlands, I guess, and it's not fun. And I'm going to use this to segue into one of the afterlife races that was added, they're Venthyr. So they're basically Nosferatu soul vampires. And again, full disclaimer, this is my personal opinion, and it's okay to disagree. You can love them all you'd like, and I won't ever argue with you on that one. But I personally hate them very much. And before you click away, let me explain. So these Nosferatu soul vampires are sitting around and being nobles all day, basically useless, not battle tacticians, kind of just a bunch of really not appealing vampires to me. I don't like their lore at all. I don't like them at all, and I feel very frustrated because I'm someone who fell in love with vampire lore added into World of Warcraft back in the expansion Wrath of the Lich King. There is something called the Vampire Curse that we could still be exploring today. It was first seen on the Sand Lane, which are vampire elves, and I adore Sand Lane. You can probably see through my past videos, I had advocated for them to be added into World of Warcraft when I saw customization and allied races, which are additional races in general, like sub-races to current races, being added. So for this new race to completely take the vampire theme, not even be real vampires, I mean, why do they have fangs? They suck souls, it makes no sense. To come around, and now everyone's begging for Venthyr to be added and not Sand Lane, or Venthyr rather than Sand Lane. It's just very, very frustrating. So after years of advocating for this to be added into the game and giving my ideas, just to see this pop up and to be told, oh, no way, we want this one instead. Let's forget about this. Or when I try to propose it as customization for Blood Elves, no, let's Lightforge Blood Elves. Yes, so I'm tired of arguing with the World of Warcraft community, trying to make my point and all of that, and very much dislike the Venthyr. So every time, Shadowlands and Revendreth remind me of the Venthyr. I mean, they're all there, so no, it's not worth my time or getting frustrated over it or just obsessing over the lore, because I loved the Vampire and the Vampire Curse. I was really hoping to see that expanded. Yes, it could be expanded in the future, and I'm hoping it is, but as of now, absolutely no sign of it. So disappointed, very disappointed about that. And they could have made connections to the vampire elves through the Venthyr, and made the curse have come from Shadowlands, but there's been absolutely no mention of that at all. Oh, and before someone says, but they were all extinct from the Alliance in Battle for Azeroth, can it? Not all of them would be on the ship. We've seen that new ones are being made. I really don't feel like getting into this argument. I mean, there's always my thread in the World of Warcraft forums if you really want to try to argue with me, but as of now, no. Granted, if enough people ask me about my opinions in that entire argument, then of course I will make a video, but as of now I don't find it necessary. So, I already went into what I would do differently for Shadowlands. I would definitely cut down the focus on mythic players. They're the top 1%. I know everyone wants to appeal to streamers and esports and all of that, but I mean, actually take player advice and suggestions is what I would do differently. I would look into the people's customization suggestions. I've seen many Blood Elf players suggest arcane tattoos, scarring for their Blood Elves, Dark Ranger options, Sand Lane options. There's so many options that they could be added. I would have made neutral faction options after Legion, and rather than the entirety of Battle for Azeroth being focused on the Horde versus Alliance faction war, I would have had that as a side plot, whereas the main focus would be the growing Void threat, and working together with the other faction after defeating the Legion, and the extremists on the faction could have their plot lines and their side plots and all of that, with all of the main characters possibly at each other's throats or whatever. But many people, including me, were not interested in that plotline. I certainly hated it. And I wanted to be fighting against this Void threat. So I would have definitely given guilds the neutral faction option, and PvE, cross gameplay, that would be my solution, starting in Battle for Azeroth. Second solution, all allied races would be neutral. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. What I'm proposing is very crazy. But I don't like factions to begin with, and I find it ridiculous, so I would have had tons of options, hairstyles and such shared throughout the races, and such like that. I would have given all of the options from Blood Elves to Void Elves to shut down that arguments, which I know comes into conflict with some people, but I don't believe in any sort of class identity or race identity or faction identity, because it was erased as soon as Void Elves and Nightborn were added, to be frank. So we should have just opened the floodgates from there, including getting rid of class race restrictions, which, yes, I know, again, oh goodness, but anything can be explained by lore at this point. I mean, you could learn the class from any technical race that knows it already. That's what makes the most sense. You can train into it, so I don't understand why they're even existing. I would have added in player housing, and that would have been an improvement on garrisons, which were not player housing. There was no customization. Now, I understand, however, that there are other bars to this, and that it's not that easy to add player housing, but I would have at least tried to work on it, maybe. Blizzard might be working on it. That's not something that anyone knows. I wish I knew. Yes, I would have added it. Would it have been easy? Absolutely not. Is it even possible? Who knows? But it's just a suggestion. In Shadowlands, there's no more customization, as they said, and no sign of allied races, and if Shadowlands races gets added, I am not rejoining the game, ever. Probably. I don't agree with them being added, personally. I don't think it makes sense, and I don't want to see them. So no sign of allied races, hopefully not them. And then, of course, no housing, nothing really interesting to me in Shadowlands as of now. I hate the story. I just decided to leave. Getting into actual other stuff, gameplay, I play a Blood Death Knight, which is a tank. Very not good on the meta right now. Tanks in their entire gameplay has changed significantly. I'm not enjoying it. I don't like running away from enemies. I know that everyone's like, oh, well, that's what you're supposed to do, but I'm not a fan of it. That concept, absolutely hate Mythic Pluses. I dipped my foot into Mythic Pluses a little bit prior to leaving. It was okay, I guess, but I came to not like them. I don't like timers. World of Warcraft seems to really love timers quite a bit. I don't like them. Torghast, and I actually enjoyed Torghast, but there's no meaningful rewards. I hate the Soul Ash system. Find legendaries absolutely pointless. Nothing rewarding for me. It's all temporary systems. I don't like the temporary systems. I love the idea of a permanent gain of something. I thought the artifact weapon was going to be a permanent gain. Very sad to see it wasn't. But with the artifact weapon, you could earn the appearances at least. They even got rid of tier sets, which were unique per class sets, and the armor that's coming out lately, not interested, so there's nothing for me in Shadowlands right now. I did love rated battlegrounds when I PvP'd, but that requires so much time that I do not have, and I don't enjoy the game enough to try them again. So, when it comes to World of Warcraft, I think it's safe to say, unless something drastic changes during Shadowlands, I'm not rejoining. I did not like the story. As a role player, I feel a complete disconnect, and I'm enjoying my time in Final Fantasy. Now, I will try World of Warcraft in 10.0, but that all depends on what's added. What I really hope to see is maybe some more allied races based on the suggestions of the community. There's Sethrak. People really would like Sethrak, including me. Soruk, ogres, Sand Lane, lots of S's. There's the Enkoan, which are fish people, and just a menagerie. Oh, Arakoa. So many allied races. Oh, and I can't forget Vrykul. Those would be a great addition too. I just listed off so many viable allied races potential that could have such rich story, and to not see them being added or thought about or any stories expanded. I mean, we're in Shadowlands, they're not relevant. Very frustrating. So if they added a few, like, based on community suggestions, also customization, neutral gameplay for guilds and PvE, I would love a neutral guild option, and of course player housing, and if it was instanced and actually customizable, I would adore it. Whether or not that's possible, again, probably not. So that's what would get me interested in 10.0. Story-wise, though, for 10.0, I would love to see a return to Northrend, possibly a revamp. Possibly things that are going on throughout the entirety of Azeroth related to the Scourge. Now, Legion was a return to Burning Crusade in the demonic theme, and 10.0 could be a return to the undead theme. Clearly, Shadowlands, being a death expansion, does not really highlight death really much aside from Maldraxxus. I want to see the undead expanded more. I don't care about the afterlife undead. I want Azeroth undead talked about more. And no, not the dumb Lightforged undead, which I also hate, by the way. So yeah, maybe a return to Dragon Isles as well. That would be amazing. Not a return, an actual going to. Dragon lore is terrible in World of Warcraft right now. I hate where it's gone. I would love for them to actually be able to hatch eggs again. So that would be a woo, yay, I'm happy about this moment if we revisited that. But yeah, there's so many options in terms of where 10.0 could go that could get me interested again. And Shadowlands and Lake are not like it, so not enjoying it. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this very long video about my ranting on Shadowlands and why I left. I am someone who's played World of Warcraft since Cataclysm, and no, I'm not a vanilla player, but I have strong opinions about the game. I love roleplay. I have such an expansive backstory for my guild and characters. But I just decided it was time for me to take a break. Probably a very long one. So, yeah, I still love the game. I have so many memories there, and I'm sad about it, but it's time to make new memories, so. I might make more World of Warcraft videos if people ask me about my opinions on various topics. I'm not going to really upkeep with my World of Warcraft knowledge right now. I mean, I do read Wowhead News, I suppose, but I'm not going to go in-depth into, oh, what's this little tidbit of lore, like I did before. That being said, if you would like more content like this, ask me some questions in the comments, share your opinions on Shadowlands. Do you still play? Why do you play? Do you agree with me or disagree with me? Respectfully, of course. And why? And yeah, so please like and subscribe, and have a nice night or day whenever you're watching this.